Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Let me give you some information about this situation. I'm 18 years old, 17 when this happened, and I live in the Netherlands, and I work at a local supermarket as a stock clerk. Almost every week we have a discount on certain items. It's called the bonus. And sometimes when you buy 2 to 3 items from one brand, you get a special product from that brand. For example, a beer glass when you buy a 6-pack, or a Lipton iced tea hat when you buy a certain number of bottles. That week, when you bought 3 items from this kid's brand, you got this rather creepy looking doll. This is what the story is based around. Oh boy, am I glad we don't offer kids toys with these products anymore. Just like everyone in this subreddit, I never thought something like this would happen to me, but here we go, it did. I was working in the afternoon on a Thursday as usual when a kid, the entitled kid, walked by slowly. I didn't think anything of it as I was just doing my job. She walked by about 3 times, and the 4th time, she asked me if the dolls were out of stock. I explained to her that more would be coming that evening and that she would unfortunately have to wait. She asked how late, and I told her they would probably arrive after closing time because of the late shipment, so she would have to wait until the next day. She walked by with a sad face, and I felt bad for her, but I continued working. I didn't really think about it anymore. Fast forward to about 2 weeks later, it's almost closing time, just 5 more minutes, and I was pretty tired. This is where the entitled mother comes in. Was that the entitled kid? She looked angry. The mother stomped straight toward me and quite angrily asked if I was a boy who told her daughter that she couldn't have one of those dolls. Me, being very tired, looked at her with a confused face, and after processing the question, I remembered the kid who asked for the doll. Yes, that's me, I replied. Do you know, you made my little girl cry. I'm sorry for upsetting your daughter, but the dolls are out of stock. It won't arrive until… She cuts me off. I don't care about the time they arrive. You'll get me a doll right now or I will make sure you get fired. I will do everything to make sure more dolls arrive as soon as possible, but the store closes in 5 minutes and… She cuts me off again. I want to look in the back. I don't believe you. She was pretty much screaming at that moment, and I saw a colleague of mine in another part of the store look up from his work and listen to where the noise was coming from. He just continued doing his work, and I did not want to call him because I thought I could just handle this myself. I brought the entitled mother to the back where we keep the dolls, where we have them. I normally never let people into this section because it's only for employees, but I didn't want her to go super Karen. So I let her in. I grabbed one of the terminals, a small device that we use to keep track of the stock in a warehouse and the quantity of the products we order in the next shipment. I showed her that there were currently no dolls in the store, and before I could show her the order we placed for new dolls, she grabbed the terminal, which is worth around €1,400 or $1,600, and threw it on the ground. I immediately asked my boss to come to the warehouse through my earpiece. The entitled mother knew she couldn't touch me or cause me any harm because A, I am under the age of 18, so it's basically child abuse, and B, there are cameras everywhere and she already knew that. But apparently only point A interested her, and she proceeded to kick all the wagons of goods we had standing in the warehouse. She also threw 6 packs of wine and beer on the floor, which made a horrible mess. After about 1 minute of this constant fear in me, my boss and 3 team leaders arrived in the warehouse to take a look at the situation. My boss was, well, not happy with the situation. Apparently, he took some kind of fight training because he grabbed the entitled mother in a certain position, so she was pinned on the ground with nowhere to move. One of the team leaders was asked to call the police. Within 20 minutes, the police arrived at our warehouse. I was surprised that the woman did not attempt to kick or slap my boss because she had been lying on the ground for this long. 2 policemen were guided to the office by 2 team leaders while I, the 3rd team leader, and the boss were still in the back of the store. After about 10 minutes, which felt like an eternity to me, the policemen and the team leaders came back, and one of the policemen put the woman in handcuffs. After that, we all went to the office. The entitled mother gave me death glares the entire way there. She also kind of whisperingly swore at me, calling me all sorts of names. When we got to the office, I feared I would have done something wrong that would indeed get me fired. This began with the entitled mother having a right to talk before me. Of course, she lied in a pretty big way, literally saying that I touched her kid. The officers probably already knew that was not the case and asked some questions about that to me. I struggled to find the right words because I had never been in a situation like this and was on the verge of crying. I had told them they needed to check the camera footage from 2.5 hours before this. They found a moment where the girl came up to me and I didn't put a finger near her. The boss complimented me for keeping enough distance due to COVID, but that didn't really come through to me because I could only think of what could happen if they did not believe me. I knew the proof was there that I didn't touch the entitled kid at all, and that was nice to know. The policeman knew enough and took the woman away from us, probably off to the police station where she deserved to be. The boss and team leaders complimented me on handling the situation and helped me clean up the warehouse. The boss noticed I wasn't in a good state to continue working, so he gave me a can of soda and told me I could go to the break room to cool down. Eventually, he just sent me home because I was too emotional from all the threats the woman constantly made. When I came home, I told my parents the entire story and they were shocked. They asked me if I wanted to continue working there and I did. There was nothing wrong with the place itself, just very rarely the people who buy stuff there. My boss and I later made the rule of not doing this with dolls and children's toys anymore because this had happened a few times before. Not this bad, but it would solve the problem of the entitled kids, and I have never seen one since. This happened a couple of months ago at an older employer. I worked at a supermarket in my state throughout high school and while in college in the United States, making $9 to start and only $10.50 at the end. The store had one store manager, two assistant store managers, one manager and one assistant manager per department, of which there were 9 departments. For 5 years I worked every position there because who knew what hiring was, right? Understaffing was a regular occurrence here, so if a department needed closing and I was working, I had to close it. From stocking to register to manager's duties, everything was game. My biggest acknowledgements were being a bookkeeper, our term for the person who keeps track of all the money. Monitor, a glorified cashier who basically wrangles our regular cashiers and divvies up cash drawers to each register. Service desk, cigarettes, lottery, customer complaints, and store opener and closer. There were 5 people who knew bookkeeping, 2 other people besides me, and the 2 managers who ran the front end of the store. There were about 5 monitors who all needed to be trained on a service desk as well. Every monitor and bookkeeper needed to know how to open and close a store. For being a supermarket in a town with about 20,000 people, we were severely understaffed. I worked 12 to 16-hour shifts at least once a week because people would call off all the time. Keep all this in mind for later on. Backstory: I started working here at 16 in high school originally as a stock person. I worked 25-hour weeks, eventually moving up to 35+ hour weeks. I moved up to the register, then monitor, then service desk, and finally bookkeeping when I turned 18, now 21. The hours were always good, and I never had a week drop below 35 hours at least, but it all changed because of some jerk. At the start of COVID-19, I was working while in college, so all these guidelines had to be followed. Everyone needed their toilet paper and hand sanitizer to keep COVID away. No biggie. On top of the guidelines, we had also been hiring a copious number of people. This store had a history of training new hires with other people who had been working for maybe a month or so. So as you could guess, training was a disaster. But since COVID had the store busy all the time, we needed more people. I wanted to train people the right way because I got sick of doing other people's jobs. In March, we had gotten 4 new hires to train for my position. Now these new hires needed training on a service desk. Easy. Let them run it while I watched and helped out the best I could. The easiest way to get people to learn. Most of them needed training here because there were 3 of us total at the time who could run it. After training everyone, 1 per shift at a time over 4 weeks, there were 7 people now ready to take on a world. But everyone who knew how to run a service desk needed training on monitor too. Guess who had to train everyone for another position? After another 4 weeks of nonsense, everyone got trained. Around this time, it was the end of May. This is where the story gets interesting. Starting in June, we had begun to cut hours since COVID started to slow down. Hours were cut for all the registered people from about 20 to 30 hours a week to 10 hours max. We got overstaffed and people started quitting left and right. Not a big deal because those positions were easy to fill, but that's when my hours started getting cut. At the end, the one new hire who started in March, who we will call Helen, had been getting really good hours. I'm talking about my hours. We had the same problem, college money, car money, the works. But then I got scheduled for 16 hours one week, and Helen got scheduled for over 35 hours. Not once since I was 18 did I get less than 35 hours. So I decided to confront the assistant manager who was in charge of scheduling. We will call him Frank. Hey Frank, I noticed my hours got cut. What's happening? I asked. I know, everyone's hours are getting cut. I have to make room for everyone, you know? Frank replied. I couldn't help but notice that Helen is getting quite the hours. So you made room for her and no one else? I questioned. I was unaware of that. I'll get you some more hours next week, he promised. The rest of the week was kinda boring since I was a workaholic. No one called me to cover shifts or anything. The following week I asked around to see who covered any shifts last week and it turns out that all the new hires got called first. That kind of annoyed me. But hey, can't do anything about it now. Later that day I checked my schedule and guess what? The same 16-hour week. I was livid. At this point, I should have been honored for my seniority there, not getting missed over in hours. I went back to Frank and confronted him. Hey, what the heck is this? I thought you'd be finding me hours this week. I can't live off of this, I said angrily. Well, it turns out that I couldn't find you hours. I tried calling, Frank started to say, but I cut him off. That's nonsense. You didn't try calling me. Not a single person called me. Instead, all the new hires got called. What the heck, man? I interrupted. There's nothing I could do. You might have to just find another job, he responded. This annoyed me beyond belief. I was ready to explode. But this is when my bright idea came into play. For a couple of days, I searched around for other supermarkets in my area offering jobs. After about a day of searching, I found a job paying double what I made now for the same qualifications. I gave them a ring and got an interview for the following week. The following day, I went into work for what I didn't know was my last shift and told Frank what was happening. Hey Frank, I just wanted to let you know I took your advice. Advice? Do you mean finding another job? He asked, confused. You're darn right. I hope you have fun. I will never forget the look on his face, completely baffled. He didn't expect me to actually find another job so quickly. And this is where my revenge began. After I walked out of Frank's office, I went around doing my usual work. During every shift, a ton of paperwork needed to be processed in a computer to close the store correctly and set up bookkeeping for the next day. Fun fact, that day in particular was NAB Day. For those who don't know what that is, it's the day that government-funded food stamps arrive on everyone's electronic benefits transfer card monthly. That day, I decided to say forget the paperwork and just not do anything. I was quitting that day because my anger got the better of me, and the store closed at about 12 a.m. And I walked out of that place as free as can be. The next day, I woke up to find some really obnoxious and angry texts from co-workers. I completely disregarded them, not knowing they said I worked that morning. I went down to the supermarket to grab some things for my house, and as soon as I walked in the door, every ex-co-worker of mine looked at me as if I had just passed on a floor. One of them pulled me aside, let's call him George, and this happened. What the heck, bro? I had to cover your shift this morning, and you have the nerve to walk in here after that? George exclaimed. I don't work here anymore. Leave me alone. I replied. I continued to get my groceries and talked to one of my closer ex-co-workers about what happened. As it turned out, Frank had no idea that the previous day was my last 10, that the entire front end of the store had gotten brutally messed over. Since the store closed at 12 a.m. and no paperwork was filed, our corporate office called the assistant manager, who was also in charge of making sure all departments were closed correctly, and asked where all the paperwork was. With no idea that I had not filed it, Frank had to go into the store over an hour away from him to file all the paperwork himself. Not only that, tons of violations were given to him because since none of the paperwork got done by the person closing, no one had a record of anything done at the store from the previous day. On top of everything, the amount of paperwork needed was practically doubled since that day was Snap Day. As soon as the store manager heard about this, she was livid. After about a month, I was working my new job and heard some information about Frank. Apparently, he had to go into a meeting with our corporate bosses and the store manager. He had gotten fired from his position due to all of this and had not been able to get a letter of recommendation from that employer either. Well, sucks to be him, huh? Since so many have asked to read about the first time my entitled aunt, Auntie Scrooge, tried to get my inheritance, I am posting it. I remind everyone this is entirely from memory and may not be verbatim, but I will do my best to recount the matter as accurately as I can. At this time, I'm now 9 years old and not entirely aware of everything going on, but a strange man has recently introduced himself to my mom, and they have had several long talks by this time, and have recently included me in some of them. Something about a large amount of money I will be receiving at 18 years old being held in something called a trust to protect it from those who will try to take it without having the right to do so, and to never ever sign any papers without him being in a room concerning them. Now, this man has never been anything but nice to me and has always had money he gives to me when he comes to the house. From the inheritance fund and always given to my mother first. From that, I got a daily allowance I had to earn. And as I later found out, it was to teach me the value of money and why is it so important. This also was just a little over a year since my father died. Now, having had my 9th birthday a month ago, my entitled aunt decided it was time to try to get her hands on my inheritance. As it's her brother's money, she believed it was hers, and hers alone apparently. She showed up on one of her weekend visits with some papers she wanted my mother and me to sign, and was quite insistent we do so. My mother told her no, not without that man, the attorney present, so he could read the forms she wanted us to sign first. Auntie Scrooge blew up at my mother and demanded we sign the papers immediately. My mother stood her ground and eventually threw them out. A few days later, that man came to the house and I was made to go to my room and play with my toys while they talked. No, there was no affair going on. Later, my mom sat me down and told me my aunt was trying to take something from us that Daddy had left for me, and there was no way she was going to let that happen. She told me not to sign any papers my aunt might try to get me to sign without her and the man being in a room with me, and to let him read the papers first, no matter how much she yells and threatens me with anything. A few days later, my aunt showed up at school with another strange man. Even at that age, I could tell he was a bad man. It just felt wrong. She wanted me to write my name on a line on a paper she brought with her. I told her, Mommy told me not to write my name on anything you want me to, unless Mommy and that man being there. She said, Honey, Auntie really needs this, so you have to sign it for me. I yelled no and ran to my teacher and told her, who immediately escorted me to the principal's office and called my mother. My aunt came storming into the office demanding to see me and was rebuffed and told to wait until my mother got there. A few minutes later, my mom came storming in full mama bear mode and let my aunt have it with absolutely no filter and made it clear she was to come nowhere near her son again without someone called an attorney present. And that's when my aunt's entitlement came out in full force. She started yelling that the money was hers by rights, she was going to sue us over it and get it one way or another. Then she stormed out. A few days later, we received a letter that set my mother to swearing. A little over a month later, my mother made me dress in something nice, and we went to a big building that the man with us called a courthouse. So after waiting, we went into this large room with lots of seats and sat at a table in the front. A few minutes later, my aunt came in with another man and sat at another table in the front. In a room with us were the teacher, the principal, and a few other people. Then another man came in. We all stood for a moment. The man called the court to session and sat at the raised seat in front and banged a wooden hammer on his desk. There was a lot of yelling from my aunt, resulting in a judge banging his gavel a few times and threatening my aunt with something he called contempt of court to settle her down. And that's when the thing that sank my aunt's case was revealed. The man with us, our attorney, stood and said, "The terms of the will are detailed clearly and will be followed to the letter, including the clear instructions that should anyone attempt to dispute the terms of the will, that person's or people's claim to any and all parts of the will are to be immediately declared null and void, and they immediately lose any and all claims to the will permanently." My aunt started screaming about that and demanded she be given her money right now. My aunt was literally pulled, kicking and screaming out of the courtroom, and we didn't hear from her for 2 weeks after that. After that, my mom did manage to get something called a restraining order against my aunt, so we never had to talk to her again. 6 months later, she tried to submit forged documents to get the money, but failed as they were immediately shown to be fake. And that's going to be the end of my story. I work at a translation office. Our job is basically to translate official documents, work certificates, academic degrees, medical papers, and so on to be used in other countries. The whole service is controlled and monitored by the judiciary. We are basically under their direct supervision. My boss had to be directly certified by the court. Some countries also require our translation to be double certified by the local court and/or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's pretty routine work most of the time, but since these are official documents, there are a lot of rules we have to follow, like what documents can be issued as official translations and how much we are allowed to charge, down to the smallest pennies. My boss is usually a super cool guy and does all he can to help people who come in, sometimes even refusing pay from people who can't afford it, even though he still has to pay the tax for the income since it gets registered in the system. Now, this is actually something my boss did. I fully agreed with him, but it wasn't my call to make. Last week, some guy, let's call him Mr. X, came in and brought us a bunch of documents to translate, including work certificates, his academic diploma, a transcript of his grades, and some other stuff. He brought them in 2 batches. So by the time we received the second set of documents, his first set was already translated and double certified by the court and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His grade transcripts were in the first batch, his diploma was in the second batch. This will be important later. At first, he refused to give us his diploma, saying that his mother had hidden the documents to prevent him from traveling abroad. Not the strangest thing we've heard. So whatever. But we kindly inform him that we are not allowed to issue a translation of copies and have to at least see the original document. So does the court and the ministry. So he went and got it a couple of days later. Now I was the one in charge of his translations, and the moment I picked up his diploma, something felt off. It was too heavy. I actually had to check several times to make sure it wasn't 2 or 3 documents stuck together. A closer examination showed that a post stamp attached to the back was not real, but instead a copy. Strange. I called my boss, since now I am sure this is a forgery. He came, checked the document, but it was really strange. These documents have forgery prevention measures like holograms, UV light sensitive prints, and seals. And most of them are in order except the stamp on the back and the fact that the photocopy looked strange. At this point, I just suggested calling the police and letting them deal with it. But my boss, the good guy that he is, didn't want to get the guy in trouble and said he wasn't 100% sure, more like 90%. So he had someone bring it to the court to check, but instructed that person to be discreet, get their opinion, and get out with a document, not leave it there as evidence. So they did just that. Within the hour, the document was back in our hands. It was a suggestion from a court official that we probably should treat it as a forgery. Hearing that, my boss decided to give the fake diploma back to the guy and send him away, as long as he brought us a translation we issued for his grade transcripts, which was for the same course as a diploma, so was also probably fake. He even offered to pay back the money he paid. Just get the translation to us, get your things, and go be a criminal somewhere else. Pretty lenient if you ask me, but it's his business, not mine. The next day, we got a call from the local court asking us why we refused to send a document belonging to Mr. X to the court to be certified. Turns out the guy had gone to court and filed a complaint against us because we refused to do his work. So now my boss was mad and did just as Mr. X wanted, sent the forged diploma to the court. They of course immediately could tell it was a forgery, seized it, opened an investigation against Mr. X, and now he's on a hook for multiple crimes, some of them with serious jail time. The court also asked us to give them the serial numbers for all the documents ever translated under this guy's name. Everything, including ID documents, work certificates, everything, so that they can contact all embassies and warn them about the possibility of forgery, which probably means the guy will be blacklisted in every country that matters. My boss made some excuse at first about not having all the serial numbers ready, but then Mr. X came in on Monday with his father and issued some strange threats. So the next work day, all the serial numbers were at the court. We also did not have to pay his money back. And to think, had he just done as asked, he wouldn't be on the hook for so many crimes, and he would also receive a full refund. I would still call the police personally, but I have to admit, this was more entertaining. I'm a pretty well-to-do businessman. I own a Corvette Stingray. Believe me, it's relevant. I just bought my new car after driving my old Honda for 5 years. There I am in Walmart with my girlfriend of 8 years. I helped her get ketchup from the top shelf. She went to get something else. Then this lady approached me. "Can you tell me where product Z is?" Me, being nice, I directed her. She saw me at the checkout but still thought I was an employee. When I got into my car, Corvette Stingray, she shouted at me that she was calling the police for Grand Theft Auto. She said she was going to get me arrested and blocked my car with her minivan. I told her that it was my car, but she was certain that it wasn't mine because Walmart employees don't have that kind of salary. The police came, asked for my ID, and I showed them my keys. They ran my number and found out that it was actually my car. They had to arrest that woman. This might not sound that serious, but believe me, she was not messing around, punching and cursing at the police officers for lying. The woman did not believe those police officers. I'm 49 female, and my birthday is relatively close to Christmas. My daughter, 17 female, has a really nice Kate Spade purse that she bought for herself over the summer. I told her I wanted one of those nice purses for Christmas or my birthday. Her purse is a shoulder bag that's relatively big. I usually wear crossbody purses that are pretty small, and I thought she'd remember that. Keep this in mind. Come my birthday, my daughter got me a what looked to be expensive Rick Kate Spade purse that was pretty big and more of a tote with a lot of room. However, I didn't really want a big purse. She should know I wear crossbody. I pretended to be really happy about it and moved on. I decided that I didn't really like it and wanted to return it and hopefully exchange it without her knowing. However, she did early birthday shopping, early November, and it ran out of time to exchange. I was honestly kind of upset, and it was a nice purse nonetheless. So instead, I thought I'd just give it to my daughter for Christmas. I wrapped it and put it under the tree for today. She opened it this morning and said, "Isn't this the present I got for you?" I hesitated and I think she knew. She immediately started to cry, saying, "That's what I thought you wanted, and what you told me to get. I worked hard to save for it." She said it was really hurtful that I'd just re-gift her the purse, but I figured she'd get more use out of it. And she'd obviously know I didn't like it if she never saw me use it. I told her to stop making a big deal out of nothing and that it was an okay gesture. She has been moody about it all day and said she would have just bought something she likes if she knew that's what would happen. Honestly, I'm starting to feel really bad about it and planning to get her a new gift she likes.